France, before the storm. In the late 18th century, France glittered on the outside, yet rotted within. Versailles dazzled with gold and chandeliers, its halls echoing with the laughter of nobles, while beyond its gates the countryside starved. Bread prices soared higher than wages, peasants dug for roots, while aristocrats feasted on banquets. The monarchy of King Louis XVI carried the weight of crushing debt from wars abroad and extravagant spending at home. Marie Antoinette, his queen, became a symbol of decadence, whispered to say, "Let them eat cake." Words she likely never uttered, but that burned like fire in the bellies of the hungry. France was divided into three estates: clergy, nobility, and the third estate. The common people, who made up 97% of the nation and bore nearly all its taxes. They were tired, restless, and humiliated by laws that declared them lesser. In the silence of taverns and village squares, whispers began to stir. Perhaps the world did not have to remain this way. The Estates General and the birth of defiance. In 1789, the king summoned the Estates General, a gathering not called in more than a century. Each estate was to cast a vote, but though the third estate represented nearly the entire nation, their single vote was always drowned out by the privileged two. Frustration boiled until the delegates of the Third Estate declared themselves the National Assembly, a voice for the people. Locked out of their hall by royal guards, they gathered in an indoor tennis court and swore an oath never to separate until they had written a constitution. The tennis court oath was not merely a pledge, it was defiance, a crack in the walls of absolute monarchy. In the countryside, peasants rose against landlords, burning documents that bound them to feudal dues. Across Paris, ordinary people armed themselves with muskets, ready to defend the Assembly's stand. France teetered on the edge of transformation. The storming of the Bastille. On July 14, 1789, Paris erupted. A crowd of workers, craftsmen, and ordinary citizens surged toward the Bastille, a fortress that stood as the iron fist of royal authority. Inside were prisoners, weapons, and gunpowder, all symbols and tools of tyranny. The crowd clashed with guards in hours of bloody chaos, musket fire rattling against thick stone walls, smoke spiraling into the hot summer sky. At last the gates collapsed and the fortress was taken. The head of the governor was paraded through the streets on a pike, while bricks of the Bastille were torn down and carried home as trophies. The fall of the Bastille was more than the fall of a prison. It was the fall of fear. News spread like wildfire, sparking peasant revolts across France. And if you've been gripped by this moment, pause for just a second. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. It fuels us to create more stories like this and ensures you won't to miss the next revolution. The Bastille's storming marked a beginning, and the world would never look at monarchy the same way again. Rights declared, hopes rising. In the weeks that followed, the National Assembly moved boldly. They abolished feudal privileges, stripped nobility of ancient rights, and proclaimed equality before the law. Then came the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a document that thundered with the words, "Men are born and remain free and equal in rights." These were not whispers in dusty rooms. They were fireworks exploding in parchment, challenging centuries of hierarchy. Inspired by Enlightenment thinkers, the Assembly envisioned a France where sovereignty belonged not to kings, but to the people. Crowds cheered, printing presses rolled, and pamphlets spread like wildfire. For the first time, France seemed to step into a new dawn. Yet dawn carried shadows. Food remained scarce. Tension grew between reformers who sought gradual change and radicals who demanded the king's head. Liberty had been declared, but peace was far from won. The March on Versailles. In October 1789, hunger itself became revolution's weapon. Thousands of women from Paris, market vendors, mothers and daughters, marched through the rain toward Versailles, their feet pounding the mud, voices shouting for bread. They stormed the palace gates, some breaking into the queen's chambers, demanding she face the fury of the people. Confronted with the mass of humanity, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette agreed to move to Paris, effectively prisoners in their own capital. The monarchy's aura of divine right cracked, replaced with the reality that power now walked in the calloused hands of ordinary citizens. The march was a reminder. This revolution was not led by generals or noblemen alone, but by women with empty bellies and unbreakable wills. The fall of the crown. As the years unfolded, the monarchy faltered. Louis XV attempted flight in 1791, sneaking toward the Austrian border, but was recognized and dragged back in chains, his people chanting betrayal. His fate was sealed when France declared war on Austria and Prussia. Monarchs abroad feared revolution, spreading like wildfire. By 1792, radical voices rose above all others, demanding blood for liberty. The king was put on trial for treason, accused of conspiring with enemies of the people. Crowds thronged Paris as the verdict rang, guilty. On a cold January morning in 1793, Louis XVI mounted the guillotine. A drumroll thundered, the blade fell, and the King of France was no more. Later that year, Marie Antoinette would meet the same fate. If you believe these moments deserve to be remembered, take a moment, subscribe, like, and share. It keeps this history alive and helps us tell the stories that shaped our world. With the fall of the crown, France was a monarchy no longer, but the revolution was far from finished. Liberty turns fierce. The death of the king unleashed chaos. France fought wars on all sides, against Austria, Prussia, Britain and Spain, while turmoil boiled within. The Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, seized control. They promised to defend liberty, equality and fraternity, but their vision grew darker with every passing month. Committees ruled by decree. Suspected enemies of the revolution were dragged into tribunals, often condemned with little evidence. Neighbors turned against neighbors. The streets of Paris echoed with the steady thud of the guillotine. What began as the cry of freedom was mutating into something grim. The Reign of Terror. From 1793 to 1794, fear itself became law. The Reign of Terror consumed France as thousands were executed. Nobles, priests, even revolutionaries deemed insufficiently loyal. Robespierre's words soared like sermons. Virtue demanded terror. The guillotine fell on the innocent and the guilty alike. Danton, once his ally, was dragged to his death. Act 2. Ordinary men and women lived in constant fear that a whisper, a suspicion, might deliver them to the scaffold. France, in its quest to destroy tyranny, had become tyrannical itself. And here I'll pause again. If these stories matter to you, help us keep them alive. Subscribe, like and share this video. Your support ensures we can continue creating cinematic journeys into history's turning points. The terror's shadow stretched long, but even shadows eventually break. The fall of Robespierre. By the summer of 1794, even Robespierre's allies feared his insatiable thirst for purity. He spoke of a new festival, a republic of virtue, and hinted at lists of traitors yet unnamed. That was enough to seal his fate. Deputies in the convention turned against him, denouncing him as a tyrant. On July 28th, Robespierre was dragged to the very guillotine he had used so freely. His death ended the Reign of Terror, but the revolution's promise had been scarred. The ideals of liberty and equality remained, yet stained with blood. The Directory's instability. France staggered forward under the Directory, a government of 5 men struggling to balance power. Corruption spread and disillusionment grew. The revolution that had once inspired the world seemed trapped in endless cycles of instability. Armies marched across Europe, spreading revolutionary ideals with bayonets. Yet at home, the people longed for stability, order, and strong leadership. In the barracks and battlefields, one name began to rise, a young artillery officer with an iron will and a genius for strategy, the rise of Napoleon. That name was Napoleon Bonaparte. From the siege of Toulon to victories in Italy, his star ascended rapidly. He became the symbol of France's strength, the man who could deliver order after a decade of chaos. By 1799, he staged a coup, toppling the Directory and establishing himself as first consul. The revolution that began with the cry of liberty ended with the march of an ambitious general. Yet Napoleon carried the torch of its ideals into battlefields across Europe, reshaping the continent. Before we close, remember, subscribe, like, and share this journey with others. It ensures you won't miss the revolutions still to come on Epoch of Change. Legacy of liberty and terror. The French Revolution remains a paradox, a struggle for liberty that unleashed terror, a cry for equality that echoed with the fall of thousands of heads, a fight for fraternity that fractured a nation. Yet out of the storm came ideas that endure, the rights of man, the notion that sovereignty belongs to the people, that no king rules by divine right. Across Europe and the world, monarchs trembled and common people dreamed. Its legacy is written not only in France's tricolour flag, but in every movement that dares to rise against tyranny. This was the French Revolution, a story of hope and horror, of courage and cruelty. And here at Epoch of Change, we bring these stories to life so they are never forgotten. Subscribe now, because the revolutions that shaped humanity are far from over.